What's up, guys? It's Bolt, and I'm back with another Remnant 2 build guide. And in this guide, we're going to go over my Invader, Wormhole, Sporebloom stealth build. Yes, that's a lie, I know. So I haven't seen too many people talking about Invader, which is very unfortunate because Invader has to be one of the strongest archetypes in the game. It has everything going for it. It has the damage. It has defense in a way that's different from the other archetypes because Invader does not rely on heavy armor or damage reduction for its defense. It relies on decoys and being elusive. And if you read the Invader archetype at the main screen when you go to select a class, it says it's the master of elusiveness, misdirecting the enemy's focus, evasion, shadows, and decoy. Now, when you read that, you might be a little confused or off put by it. You're like, oh, I don't want to play like that. But when you actually dig deeper and you play to it like it's supposed to be played, to its strengths, this archetype is by far probably the best defense oriented archetype in the game. And I'm going to show you guys how to do so. So let's go over the decoys. Invader has a special, unique skill in which every time it casts one of its abilities, it leaves behind a decoy. The decoys have insane enemy aggro. Like, even bosses will draw aggro to the decoys. On top of that, in my opinion, Invader has the strongest relic perk in the game. Every time you consume a relic and dodge within 10 seconds of consuming that relic, you will leave behind a decoy. And again, guys, this decoy draws insane aggro. Every enemy, every elite, every boss will draw aggro to your decoy. This is when you reposition, you regroup, set traps, throw bombs, whatever it is. This is how you play the Invader. And Invader comes with a trait called Untouchable, and rightfully so. And in this video, guys, I'm going to show you how to play Invader and how to truly remain untouchable. Okay, so starting off, I'm going to show you how to play the Invader archetype. First things first, let's go over the perks for the Invader, starting with the Prime. Casting an Invader skill leaves a decoy for 3 seconds, which draws enemy fire. You deal 15% additional damage to enemies not targeting the Invader. Very useful Prime perk for mobbing, and this is why I have Invader slotted first when we mob. When we spam our wormhole in the world and dungeons, we will be leaving those clones behind, getting all the aggro from the elites and all the mobs that are out there. This is when you use your Sporebloom for some massive damage. You can set traps, drop a tremor on the clone, use your Spectral Blade for big AoE against all of the enemies. There's so much you could do. You could retreat, you could heal, you could regroup, reload, whatever you need to do. That's what the clones are there for. You need to use the clones for your advantage, as that's your strongest feature in the class. That is your defense mechanism. Next up, we have the damage perk, Shark. So basically, anytime you spend stamina, you're going to gain a stack of range and melee damage for a total of a whopping 35% damage increase. Really, really good. Amazing. And this will stack with the Prime perk, 15% additional damage when they're not targeting you, for a whopping 50% range and melee damage. Absolutely absurd. You love to see it. Next up, we have the Loophole Team perk. This is a pretty good quality of life perk for the Invader, as we are not using relics to heal. So if some enemy is targeting your decoy, when you attack them, you're going to gain 7.5% of the base damage as lifesteal. Really important because, again, we're not using the relic to heal, so we need other forms of healing, and that's where the Loophole Team perk comes in handy. Circumvent is really nice also because we are not running any form of endurance in this build. We do not need endurance because we're using our clones to outsmart the enemy. We're not spam dodging, we're not running around, this and that. We're carefully placing ourselves in opportunistic locations where we could capitalize. So when we do need to dodge here and there, we get a nice reduction. Works out perfectly. And then, guys, hands down, the most powerful, strongest relic of all the archetypes, we have the Override Relic perk. Anytime you consume a relic, the next, first off, we reduce threat generation by 25%. Comes in handy for world and dungeon clearing. But the main thing is, the next dodge that we do will produce one of those clones that will draw all enemy aggro, even bosses, doesn't matter. And that's when we can capitalize and do our thing. Now I'm going to show you just how to do this. So, we have an enemy right here. We're going to use Wormhole. Clone is right there. Draw aggro, we get the extra 15% damage. Boom, shoot them. Big damage if there's a group of enemies if you want. Nice AoE right there when they're targeting your clone. Or you could drop a trap, guys. Like, for example, you consume the relic. Leave your trap behind. Everybody's gaining aggro on your clone. Drop the tremor. Or if you want, you're in the group right there, throw a bomb. Boom. Plenty of things to do. Big group right there. Again, Spectral Blade, AoE, proc your Butcher's Fetish. Keep it moving. Got a clone. Leave it behind. You need to heal, you run. Pull your butt on out of there. Get a good healing. If you have blood warts slotted in, or whatever you need to do, you need to retreat, hide behind a wall. We have wall hacks with Hunter's Mark. You hide, wait for the enemy to come. You could wall hack with Spectral Blade and nice and safely take out your opposition. Now, when we're bossing, you're going to be like, wait, Bolt, so how are we going to proc the Akari Warband that we have equipped if we're not really dodging that much? We're using the clones. That's a good question. So, just like in Remnant 1, you're able to self-proc your Akari Warband with your own attack. So, with the Sporebloom mod, you can shoot it into the ground and dodge simultaneously, and it'll proc your Akari Warband like this. Just like that, and you proc your Akari Warband. Alright, starting things off, we have the mobbing version of the build for dungeons and world clearing. We have the Invader slotted in first in this version, because we're going to be spamming Wormhole so much during the world clearing that we're going to be needing the Prime perk for the clones to be spawned. And it's pretty difficult to have constant uptime with Hunter skills during world clearing. This is more for bossing. It's easy to keep the skills up. And for Hunter, we're going with Hunter's Mark, so we can have the wall hacks and the extra 15% crit chance while we're dungeon and world clearing. Going first off with the relic, we have the Diverting Heart. Very important for this build, guys, because we're trying to reduce the cooldown of Wormhole so much because we will be spamming it a ton when we're doing the dungeon clearing. And attached to it, we have the Mythic Range critical damage, Mythic Range critical chance, and the skill cooldown to bring that cooldown even further down. Necklace is the Butcher's Fetish because we will be using the Spectral Blade to proc it. Spectral Blade paired with the Hunter's Mark will allow us for wall hacks and know when the enemies are approaching us. And through the wall, you will be able to use the Whirlwind mod on the Spectral Blade to attack your enemies without them even knowing, and you will be proccing your Butcher's Fetish. We have Reinvigorate attached to our Spectral Blade because it reduces our stamina. Remember, guys, we don't have endurance on this build, so that's very nice, and it's going to give us a nice 15% additional damage, and better yet, a 10% crit chance. Followed up, after Butcher's Fetish, we have the Black Pawn Stamp and the Burden of the Stargazer. This will further reduce our cooldowns to the point where we have it at 15.8 seconds, and then if we use the Diverting Heart during our world dungeon clearing, it brings it down to like 7 seconds, which is absolutely ridiculous. Unfortunately, the skill cooldown concoction is not working properly, but if it was, that would be another option to use in order to further decrease our skill cooldowns. That would probably bring it down to like 4 or 5 seconds, which is absurd, but I digress. Next up, we have the Outcast Ring because we are using 2 single-shot weapons and we're going to be mobbing, so enemies will be all around us. We're going to need those fast reloads. Outcast Ring is a great option for that. And since we are not healing with our relics, we need some kind of form of healing paired with our regrowth and triage traits. which we will be getting into in a second, we have the low yield recovery ring, which is a nice mobbing ring for quality of life. We won't have to worry about heals because triage also buffs the regeneration from the low yield recovery ring, so we will have a nice steady flow of health coming in as we're mobbing. And on top of that, we remember, guys, when one of our perks here, the loophole, is when we're attacking an enemy that is targeting our decoy, we get a nice 7.5% base damage as lifesteal. So we're doing pretty good in the health department despite not using a relic to heal. On to the weapons. Star of the show is the Sporebloom, hardest hitting weapon in the game at base 600 damage maxed out. The mod is not the greatest, but it comes in handy when you want to just slow enemies down quickly. It's not the best form of slow compared to the other slow mods, but it's okay, and it generates pretty fast, so you can spam it a little bit. But it also comes in handy when you want to proc your Akari Warband when we switch to the boss build. Very handy to proc your Akari Warband with Sport Shot. We have the Slayer mutator attached to it because it increases our reload speed, and we get a nice little damage buff on each reload. Spectral Blade we already went over. And now we have the Short Shot. Attached to this, I suggest using some kind of crowd control. Tremor is a great choice. Scrap Shot, Song of Ephir, anything like that that's going to be great for crowd control when the enemies are distracted by your clone and you could place it on it. Very nice. And we have the Time Wave Mutator. This is optional, guys. I just thought it was, pretty nice to use. If I'm surrounded by enemies, I could get extra slow on them, so I could get a nice little get out of jail free in that regard. But this is it. This is the mobbing version of the build, and we're going to go move on next to the boss version. Okay, so this is going to be the boss version of the build, the version you will be using when you're doing your boss battles. First big change is now we have Hunter slotted in the first slot. This is because we want the Dead to Rights perk. We can indefinitely have the Hunter skill up in a boss fight very easily with weak spot. We have the Hunter Shroud because we want to remain hidden throughout the boss fight, and for the nice damage boost we get when we reveal ourselves to do our Wormhole shot. Wormhole, when used with Hunter Shroud, you want to first Wormhole, you won't be shrouded, wait about a second to shroud, and then you fire your shot. That's how you get your damage buff from the Hunter Shroud. Make sure. So Wormhole, wait a second, shroud, fire your shot. Next change we have is the Abrasive Whetstone. Remember what I said in the beginning of the video, you want to play Invader like a ninja, so we will be using our clones and our shroud to be deceptive. While the enemy is not targeting us, we could use pipe bombs. Pipe bombs are probably the best bleed source in the game because they last the longest, so very clutch. And this is a great neck, probably one of the strongest necks in the game because it raises our crit chance and our crit damage. Along with the Akari Warband, remember guys, we could use that Spore Shot to proc it ourselves if we're not perfect dodging a lot in a fight. And also you could use other things like Brightstone. If you throw a Brightstone against the wall, you can perfect dodge it and it will activate your Akari Warband. Next up we have the Probability Cord because we have a pretty high crit chance on this build, so our crit damage is going to be boosted up pretty significantly. Big damage boost right here with Probability Cord. We're going for weak spots on this build, so we have the Ring of Flawed Beauty. If for some reason you're in a fight where you are hitting the weak spot very easily, then you can swap this out for Xanius Malice, but either one is fine. Can't go wrong with either. And then here's a nice little change of pace. We have the Targeting Jewel, guys. One of the best rings for shotgun type weapons. It decreases our weapon spread and increases our range. So our reticle for the Sporebloom is going to be nice and tiny, so we could squeeze in and group our shots together for maximum damage. So this is an indirect buff to our DPS, and it also comes in handy for the range because let's say we wormhole pretty far away by mistake, we got the little extra range boost, so we do not lose that big damage that we would normally do with wormhole. So this is a nice ring, and you're gonna pair that up with the Tranquility Font concoction because this also reduces our spread and our recoil, so give us a nice little tiny reticle for our Sporebloom. This is very important, guys, for the build, so make sure you grab a couple of Tranquility Fonts. Back to the weapon now, we have a little change. Now we have the Ghost Shell Mutator. This is going to give us big damage. This is where big damage comes from. After three consecutive weak spots, and that doesn't matter. I could switch off. So let's say I shoot 3 times with the, or twice with the Sporebloom, and I switch to short shot, shoot short shot. It still stays on Sporebloom, so that's really nice, and we will get the nice 40% weak spot hit. But the best thing about Ghost Shell, guys, which is a very underrated mutator, is that we get the 15% crit chance for weak spots. And with Wormhole, you want to make sure you get a crit. You want to see that 16k, you want to see that 19k, that 20k damage, depending on the weak spot of the enemy. You want to see big numbers, and we need that and Ghost Shell helps us out with that. Spectral Blade remained the same, and on short shot we now have Twisting Wounds. This is because sometimes it's, I want to say, not practical to throw a pipe bomb in certain situations, so we want to make sure we have the bleed up at all times for our abrasive whetstone. So that's where the Twisting Wounds comes in for the boss fights. On to the trait allocation, starting off with Long Shot, that is the Hunter trait, and then we have Untouchable, which is the Invader trait. We expect maximum regrowth and triage because we're not healing with relics, guys, so we need the regen. If you pair these with a Bloodwort, you will be more than fine with your health intact. Swiftness, we have 8 points. Wish I could max it out, but I couldn't. But we need this to remain nimble, to move around the map and replace ourselves, regroup, whatever you need to do. The speed comes in handy. Vigor is maxed out. Expertise is maxed out, very important for that skill cooldown because we're going to be spamming Wormhole. Handling is very important. We have it maxed because we want that tiny reticle for the Sporebloom. And finally, the Glutton is maxed. This is very important too because we need that to reduce our skill cooldowns with Diverting Heart and to place clones around the map so the enemy can target the clone and not us, and we could remain opportunistic in our attacks. Well, I hope everyone now has a better understanding of how to play the Invader archetype and open some non-believers' eyes in the true power of the Invader. Invader has a lot going for it. Probably one of the best all-around archetypes in the game. It has defense in the form of evasion, and it has massive burst damage. Remember, guys, always use your relics, spam your clones, and be opportunistic in your attacks. Set traps, play smart, and keep moving. Remain untouchable. That is the key to the Invader archetype. I hope everybody enjoyed this video, found it helpful, informative, and if you did, please consider giving me a like. It really helps my channel out, and I will continue to produce more content for Remnant. I've always been loyal to the game, so I look forward to bringing you guys more builds, boss kills, live streams, and all of that good stuff. But until then, I'll catch everyone on the next one.